Thank you for joining me for another episode of Growing Guelph. Science is all around us, shaping the world in ways big and small. Today on Growing Guelph, we're speaking to someone who's ensuring that everyone in Guelph has the chance to explore, experiment, and be inspired by science. Dr. Joanne O'Meara, co-founder of Royal City Science, shares her journey, the community's role in this exciting initiative, and her vision for a science-filled future in our city. My conversation with her right now. So the episodes have started pretty casual in terms of starting in the middle of a conversation. So I guess I can just start things off by saying, Joanne, thanks a lot for joining me on Growing Guelph today. I'm excited to talk all things Royal City Science.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
Can you maybe just talk to our listeners a little bit? Are you able to kind of give an introduction to yourself and what inspired you and the co-founder of Royal City Science, the great Orbaks, to establish the organization, and how did your backgrounds influence its creation?
For sure. Yeah. So we started Royal City Science in 2020 during the depths of the pandemic. So we've been going for a little over 4 years now. And we incorporated as a nonprofit organization, and then we got our registered charity status in 2022. So it really all started because Orbax and I work together in the Department of Physics. I've been a faculty member there for over 20 years now, and Orbax is a staff member, and his area of expertise is in terms of outreach, so community-based kind of programming, but also he's been a big help in the department with digital content related to education, and especially during the pandemic. And so he and I have collaborated a lot over the last many years in community outreach projects. A few years ago, we were doing a project with the Guelph Civic Museum. It was in collaboration with a science communication course that I was teaching to our third year physics students. And their group project at the end of the semester was to design and build a science center type activity for elementary school students. And we gave them a budget. They actually got to go and spend money and build stuff. And we gave them guidance along the way. And then in the last week of the semester, we took 3 activities to the Guelph Civic Museum, and they organized field trips for students to come, elementary school students to come through. And the first year we ran, we had like over 700 students come through in the span of a week. And when we announced we were doing it again, the spots filled up right away, and the teachers loved it and the students loved it. And Orbax and I just kind of started talking about, the fact that there's really nowhere around here to do this kind of thing except, one-off type activities. And I have a daughter who's now graduated from grade 12. And in, the whole time she was in school, we went once on a field trip to the Ontario Science Centre in Toronto, which was great. But I think we spent more time on the bus than we did in the exhibit hall. It's just not accessible for so many people in this part of Ontario. And now it's not accessible to anybody because it's temporarily shut down. So we just started kicking the idea around. And just before the pandemic started, we started talking about it in January and February of that year. And then, everything shut down and went sideways. And we just continued to discuss the idea. And it's really snowballed since then.
Well, I'm very passionate about science and science communication myself, and it's so great seeing a group that is like fairly new, but still just the momentum behind the movement and like you were saying, the Science Center is a great resource, but I should say was a great resource.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in Niagara Falls, so it's like 2 hours from Toronto, and I
Right.
think we went to the Science Center once, and I went a few times like with my parents and that, but
Yeah.
it's 4 hours on the highway for a few hours at the Science Center, and having
Yeah.
something closer to home, especially closer to home here in the Wellington region, would be just really opening a door for so many people and for so many kids, and I guess people of all ages.
Absolutely.
I'd love to kind of ask you a little bit more about your like the origins of being interested in science
For sure.
communication. Like I know
Yeah.
for me, even long before I studied, like before I had my first high school science class, I was sort of bit by I don't even know if it's just generic science enthusiasm,
Right.
like the Bill Nye and the Magic School Bus. And
Yep.
for many years growing up, I just wanted to be a scientist. I couldn't have told you what type of scientist I wanted to be, which I guess was very like 18th century of me, or 19th century, like
Hmm.
classic science person who just studies science in general and makes contributions without having to specialize. But
Yeah.
and then I went to school for biology, which I believe I saw a interview with you where you said that you actually started your undergrad in biology before you switched over to physics. But
Yeah.
maybe just talk a little bit about like growing up. What was your relationship to science and science outreach and communication?
For sure, yeah. So I grew up in the West End of Toronto, so getting to the Ontario Science Centre was a little bit easier for me than from going from Niagara Falls, for sure. So I was always that kid that was harassing my parents with annoying questions,
Hmm.
always asking why and how do things work and all of those kinds of things. And yeah, definitely growing up, elementary school, high school. I thought I wanted to go into the sciences. Really, I'd say for the most part, guidance counselors were like, "Oh, you like sciences? You should be an MD." And I kind of thought about that. And when I went to university, I didn't know what I wanted to do in terms of the specific discipline. I just knew that I like science and math, and I wanted to go that way. So I went to McMaster for my undergrad, and actually ended up staying there for my PhD. I went to Mac almost not exclusively, but a big part of it was they didn't make me choose my major in first year. It was just you're in science and you can take first year to figure it out. And I really thought I was going the life sciences route. And then first year biology and I really did not gel. And I really, really liked the first year physics course and the calculus.
Hmm.
And so after first year in the summer, I was debating and even then, I was like, oh, I don't know. Physics seems like it'll be really hard, but I'll just give it a go. And what's the worst that can happen? If I don't like it, I'll just switch out again. So that's kind of how I fell into physics. And then I stayed there to do my PhD with a faculty member who I'd had the chance to work with as a summer student. But even as an undergrad, I started doing outreach because there was a group of people involved in the physics club, which is just a bunch of undergrads who were doing physics majors. And they were friends, but also, fellow students. And one of the things that we did was we would take some of our favorite demos out to local elementary schools, and we'd do, little physics road shows for some of the local elementary schools. And it was a blast. I loved it. And so I've really been doing it since I was an undergrad. And then I continued on. I did my PhD. I went and did a postdoc in the States for a couple of years. And then I got back here into Southern Ontario to work as a faculty member. And when I started at Guelph, they were really, and continue to be, they were really quite open about allowing faculty members to play to their strengths. So everybody is expected to do teaching and research and service, which is broadly defined as pretty much anything that's not research or teaching. And so, yeah, they were quite, open to the idea of if I really enjoy outreach and I'm good at it, then do that and pursue that. And so that's kind of been how I've continued on with it. And I went and did a 2-week science communication course in Banff a few years ago, which was really, really great experience. And then I brought that back and I've been teaching. I haven't been teaching it the last couple of years, but I've been teaching the science communication course to our students, giving them an opportunity to develop some of those informal communication skills that we really hadn't been focusing on too much in the past. It was very much about, learn how to write a lab report and do assignments, but there wasn't a lot of emphasis on how do you communicate, what you do, which is quite technical, to someone who doesn't necessarily have a background in it. That could be your boss, that could be, a politician that you're lobbying. So yeah, that's kind of how that course came about. And it's absolutely a passion of mine. I think, especially with physics, I think there's a tendency to see it as, like I did between first and second year, that it's like this super intimidating topic that you have to be super smart to jump into. And it's not true. Like, it's just not true. I think everyone should know a little bit about physics because it's so related to everything around us.
Hmm. Yeah, the building blocks of the world. I mean, um, I studied biology, but I'm the first to admit that like biology is basically applied chemistry, which is basically applied physics, and
Exactly.
you
They're all
can't have
related.
yeah, they're it's like a Russian we call it the Russian nesting doll of
Yeah.
specialization, and everyone relies on each other because no one can modern science is too big for any one mind to really comprehend.
Yeah.
Um, Growing up, were there any of the like famous science communicators that resonated with you, or ones that maybe were your favorite? Like personally, Carl Sagan's my guy, and just the way he wrote, the way he talked about science in
Yeah.
the original Contact series, and his novels, his fiction novels, and his nonfiction like books. Like I could just read that man's writings for like the rest of my days and be
Yeah.
happy. But what about you?
I didn't actually get exposed to Carl Sagan very much at all growing up. No one in my family is at all kind of sciencey.
Mm,
So I was kind of the black sheep of the family, the oddball. So yeah, I would say, I was a pretty, I read a lot, but I didn't read a lot of science fiction or a lot of nonfiction. It was pretty much just fiction. I would say a little bit Bill Nye. But I would say my inspiration was from classroom, from great teachers, and
mm.
getting to ask questions and not have people get fed up with me asking questions. And I think that was really a big part of being inspired to continue on.
Yeah, teachers. It's cliche to say, teachers are just such a critical, like the right teacher at the right time can just
Absolutely.
open up doors for people.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I
oh,
was just going to
sorry.
say back in the day when I was in high school, there was grade 13 still. And
Mhm.
so we had a grade 12 physics class and a grade 13 physics class. And my grade 12 physics class was a disaster. It was not a great inspiring teacher situation. And I actually debated whether I was even going to take grade 13 physics. But I did because it kind of like, well, I'm going into science, I should take all three. And then my grade 13 physics teacher was amazing. It was a second career. He had been working as a professional engineer for many years and then had come back to teaching because he wanted to. It was his first year of teaching, and he was just, yeah, he just let us play. Like he let us, obviously he was teaching us, but I just remember having such a completely different experience in grade 13 physics compared to grade 12 physics. And that was a big influence on me.
Yeah, I still credit my science and physics teacher in high school, Mr. Putman at St. Michael Catholic High School in Niagara Falls.
Nice.
Great teacher, and just the way he explored topics with us, it was always engaging and interesting. So,
Yeah,
grade 11, we're learning about like the gravitational constant, and we calculate the force of attraction between two, like making a bunch of assumptions, but between two students who sit next to each other in the class, like
right.
their heads, like how much their heads are being attracted to each other. And it's just
Yeah,
two guys in the class who sit next to each other. And
yeah,
just like little things like that, that like th they take extra time, but for teachers to put together. But immediately people are like, oh, okay, I know, I see what I'm doing. This isn't super abstract. This is, and it's calculating something that like is outside of our realm of understanding because we all deal with gravity and we don't think about every other object in the universe still being attracted to each other and what that means, and just um the simplest thing of like a quick question for homework that can stay with you for the rest of your life because of a
yeah.
teacher who put a little bit of inspiration and creativity into it.
Absolutely, yeah. And context is everything. I think it's
Mhm.
really key, and it's easier in some areas of physics than others, but I think it's still like so critical to be able to frame it in a way that students can connect to, because otherwise it does feel a little bit like an exercise of, a little bit of a futile exercise of just calculating stuff because that's what the teacher's going to grade. And, that's not what education is supposed to be about.
Yeah, I think for me, learning science and math, like I wish that I had had some of the video resources that currently exist for learning math, because
Yeah,
sometimes what I thought at the time were just these abstract concepts of like moving numbers around and following these rules, and like you would sort of learn the original derivation for something, but then it was all just about the memorization. And that was so much harder to wrap my head around than
Hmm.
physics, where you can like draw out the forces diagrams and you can like take account for like you can physically see and understand something. And now I see that there's lots of great resources out there where you're learning like trigonometry and these things that are tricky to wrap your head around, but then people have come up with these visual diagrams and ways of expressing the math of it all. Yeah, I think we're kind of in a very exciting time when it comes to the tools that are at students' disposal,
Hmm.
like at their like they can take advantage of.
Yeah.
And I'm someone who's very reluctantly excited about AI and the great change that it's going to bring to our societies, but something that I am like easily excited about and like just not scared of is what having every student have their own personalized tutor that can like obviously it's not going to take the place of a great teacher, but there's something there about like the fact that it can tap into students, it can work with them. It won't be 30 students doing 20 homework questions just because they all have to do the same things. It'll be like, okay, try a question, get it wrong, and then it can tap into it, it can adapt and it can change. And instead of
Yeah.
these like static textbooks, that's going to be a um something that like almost like a video game or something, right? Like you can gamify it, it can adapt to the students' learning potentials. And I think that's all very exciting and very
Hmm.
cool.
Absolutely.
So, Royal City Science does a number of different events, and can you share some of the examples of your STEAM pop-up events and how they
Yeah.
engage the Guelph community, and maybe just remind people if they don't know what does STEAM stand for?
Yeah, so STEAM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, Arts, and Mathematics. And so we have done quite a few different types of events over the past 4 and a bit years. Our very first event, because it was still during COVID, we actually organized what we called the Solar System Stroll, which was a scale model of the solar system on the city of Guelph. So there were stations scattered around town. The Sun station was right at St. George's Square. And at each station, there was just a QR code in the window of a business that you scanned, and it took you to a website that said, "Welcome to Mercury" or "Welcome to Venus." And it was kind of stats about the planet. And then there was activities that kids could do at home that somehow related to a theme for that station. And we encouraged people to take solar system stroll selfies and send it in to us for a little prize pack. So it was a lot of fun, and we had a lot of great support and response to that. So obviously we've been moving to more in-person programming since then. That was a great thing to be able to do outside and on your own time. So in the last little while, we've really kind of been focusing on two main things as the planning aspect of actually building a physical thing is starting to ramp up. So the programming that we're continuing to do is a monthly series called Science on Tap, and that is generally at Royal City Brewing. Right now, it is the first Thursday of every month. So the December event is December 5th, and that one is going to be one of our mathematicians at the University of Guelph, Dr. Mihai Nika, and he is coming to do some fun tricks with coin tosses and talk to us about statistics and probability in a fun, hands-on kind of goofing around way. He was actually one of our speakers in last year's series. He came for the March edition to do kind of a Pi Day related event. Where he taught us all how to measure the irrational number pi using spaghetti noodles. So we had like 50 adults in a pub on a Thursday night with spaghetti noodles and pieces of paper actually measuring pi. And it was so much fun. Anyway, so I'm excited that he's coming back and doing another activity for us. They're monthly, they're different themes every month. The last one we did in November was actually an update from us, the organizers of Royal City Science, of what we've been up to because it was close to International Science Center and Science Museum Day.
Mhm.
October was a women's health themed event, and then September was all about evolution. In the new year, we're running until June. We've got someone coming to talk about ice cream and the science of ice cream. That's later in the spring. We've got someone coming to talk about food safety. We've got someone coming to talk about lead used in makeup in kind of historical eras to get that really, really white kind of color and like the health effects of, or the potential health effects of that. We have a local author, actually artist. She's a textile artist, fiber artist, and she does art that's inspired by science. She's amazing. Her Instagram is Neurons and Nebula, I think, and her art is phenomenal. And she's done the illustrations for a book called Stitching Science. And so it's an A to Z kind of thing. And for each letter, she's done the artwork. And then the author's coming to talk about the little kind of essay that she's written to go along with each piece of art. So that's the January one. So anyway, all over the map. It's a lot of fun. It's about 2 hours on a Thursday night in a pub. You can have a beer and you can have some snacks and you can learn about some science in a super fun, casual way. That's mainly for adults, but it doesn't have to be. If your kids want to come, that's totally fine too. And then the other big thing that we've been doing a lot of with programming is our mobile planetarium. So a few years ago, one of the retired faculty members from the Department of Physics at the University of Guelph, Jim Stevens, he passed away, and in his will, he had designated money to be donated to the Department of Physics for outreach efforts. And Jim was an amazing guy, a mentor to many of us, and he was a very larger than life character. So we wanted to do something significant with this and not just kind of, use a little bit here, a little bit there. So we applied to the Canadian Space Agency to get matching funds for that donation. And with that, with the CSA money and Jim's donation, we were able to buy a 7-meter diameter mobile planetarium. So that's about 23 feet, I think, diameter. It's big. It needs a ceiling clearance of about 15 or 16 feet. So we can take it to a school gymnasium, and it's inflated. It's blown up through a blower fan and just inflated that way throughout the show. And then the projector gets positioned in the middle and it's projecting all onto the inside of the dome. And we can run different shows. So we've gone to schools in Brantford and Cambridge and Guelph and Kitchener. And we've been to one of the museums in Waterloo to run some shows. We were actually down at the Aberfoyle Fall Fair in September to run shows there. It's amazing. It's just such a great way to take a really immersive experience to the community and connect with people where they are, not kind of requiring people to come onto campus to be able to learn about science. So yeah, that's been a lot of fun, and that's all ages stuff, and yeah, we're all over the place in the community with that.
Wow. So I'll include some links to upcoming events and where people can check out the calendar of things happening. This episode will be coming out in mid to late December, I think like
Okay.
a week before Christmas-ish. So sounds like if you're listening and it's end of December, check out what events are happening in January. That was the
Yeah, that's the
kids book
Stitching
one, right?
Science.
Yeah.
Yeah, Stitching Science book launch is the January. I believe it's January 9th. I think we chose not to do the very first Thursday in January. I think it's January 9th. But
Mhm.
yeah, people can find out upcoming events on our website, or they can sign up for our newsletter and then they'll get emails when we have events coming out.
Very cool. Um, so I wanted to ask you next about the vision for the potential future science center in
Yeah.
it's Wellington County, technically, right?
Yep, it is.
So I know I saw a news article about this, and I think that was the original. Like, okay, I've gotta speak to these people on the podcast because this is too cool. And I already talked about my enthusiasm for the old science center, the Toronto Science Center, and
Mhm.
but like focusing on the future. Tell us about this upcoming potential project.
Yeah, absolutely. So this was what we started for in the first place, was the bold idea of building a new science center. So this was long before the one in Toronto was temporarily closed. The idea just being that, as I said, so many Ontarians, it's not really feasible to get to Toronto for a day trip to go to the Ontario Science Center. So yeah, the idea was to build a science center in this part of Ontario. Originally, we were thinking in the city of Guelph because that's where we live and work. But then we have kind of been thinking more lately around the idea of being in the township of Puslinch, just down the road from Guelph. for two reasons. One, because it's close to the 401, so that would mean it makes it a lot more accessible for people from Hamilton, Niagara, London, even the west side of Toronto, Mississauga, Brampton, that kind of area. Also, because we've had a lot of enthusiasm from folks in Puss Lynch to get behind this project, so that's fantastic. And then, really, another part of it is that Puss Lynch has a lot of gravel pits, active and former, because of the geology of their region. And so we began thinking about the idea of really combining our science center idea, tourism idea into a reclamation or a rehabilitation of an active or former gravel pit as part of the experience. And then, this really becomes a living laboratory that every time you visit, it's a new experience. And there are opportunities to go out on the lands and do some citizen science experiments, go for a hike around the property and count birds or take a little water sample, or, there's all kinds of things that we could be doing to make it such a unique experience, very different from other kinds of tourism opportunities in the region or even in the province, honestly. So that's been a really exciting kind of development. So there's really kind of three possible locations that we're looking at right now. I actually just heard from a community member this week about another piece of property that's a possibility. I've got a meeting with them next week, so we shall see. We haven't nailed anything down yet, but I think that's really kind of the next big step. We've got our visioning exercise completed. As you can see on our website, we worked with an amazing architecture firm from Toronto to do that. And really, the next piece is to do the feasibility aspect, the detailed business plan, the needs assessment and market analysis, and how would we be different, how we differentiate ourselves, how do we make it financially sustainable as well as environmentally sustainable. So all of those things are kind of our next major push.
There's something very inspiring and cool about the idea of like a classic symbol of like industrialization, like a gravel pit, and
Hmm.
then the transformation of it being turned into a place that is um, taking science and trying to give it back to the community and like to reach the next generation, and using something that's like just a the symbol of like previous century or previous couple centuries.
Hmm.
Um, Literal like sort of destruction of a space, obviously like for useful purposes, and but yeah, I don't know. I think that's a really cool idea symbolically.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Wherever it does end up being.
Hmm.
I'm excited to find out more about that, and I guess that goes right into my next question is how can local residents and organizations and anyone listening who wants to get involved with Royal City Science, whether through volunteering or sponsorship or participation in events, like where would you tell them to start?
Yeah, I'd say the best thing is just send us an email. So it's royalcityscience@gmail.com, or go to our website and there's like a little box there where you can fill in to send us an email. If you want to help volunteer, or we have an active database that we're maintaining of people who want to help out with events. If you want to make a donation, that would be amazing. We actually just launched a Royal City Science fund with the Guelph Community Foundation. So they're helping us to extend our reach on fundraising, and also amplifying the value of the funds because they help to reinvest the funds as they come in. And so help to build a little bit of interest on that as well, and help with the administration, which is really great because we are entirely volunteers. So having them helping out with that is fabulous. Yeah, donations, corporate support. We're trying to connect with some of the, science and technology type organizations in the region, and to see if they would like to come on board as kind of founding corporate sponsors, to really help us get going and get the feasibility study funded. And then we can kick it into the next phase, which would be the capital fund.
That's hearing you talk about the importance of volunteers. As we're recording this episode today, the episode 4 of Growing Guelph just came out, where I talked to Kate Johnston, the executive director of Hillside Music Festival. So,
Okay.
music festival, science center, very different outcomes, but uh, we talked a lot in that conversation just about how Guelph
as a community, Wellington as a community seems to just want to step up and devote their time to things that they're passionate about. And, Hillside's unique as a music festival that it's so heavily run and led by volunteers and that core volunteer team of like over 1,000 volunteers that give time and effort. And yeah, I think it speaks to something that we should all be proud of and that we should all think about kind of tapping into more is that if you have the privilege and the space in your life to give back, like there's almost nothing more rewarding than just giving your time to a cause that you are passionate about.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like I said, we are entirely volunteer. There's nobody getting paid to do this. So yeah, help is fantastic. If there's, different skill sets are hugely valuable. Someone who's got an accounting background or someone who's got some legal expertise or somebody who has a lot of programming experience. I mean, we could use it all. So yeah, if anyone wants to connect, that'd be great. As I said, we maintain an active database. We put shout outs to people on a pretty regular basis. We're running the planetarium show this weekend, and we've got probably half a dozen people coming out to help us do that. And yeah, it is for sure an amazing community for grassroots volunteer run initiatives.
Mhm. Are there any particular memorable success stories or maybe feedback that you've received from the community that, in your opinion, highlights the impact that the Royal Cities initiatives have had?
Yeah, I'd say one stands out. So we were running an after school club a couple of years ago, sort of from January to June. We had some funding from the National Research Council, and we had two sessions once a month. We split them up in terms of age groups. So we had the younger kids earlier in the afternoon, like after school, obviously, but kind of pre-dinner. And then we had some older kids later in the evening. And it was and we did it for free because we had we try to do everything either, extremely low cost by donation, free if we can get the subsidy. And this was sponsored by the National Research Council, so we didn't charge. And as soon as we posted that the next one was open for registration, spots filled up right away. We had waiting lists every month. And there's this one young girl who came every month without fail, and they were coming from Brampton every time to come to this activity. And she was very quiet girl, but she was so in love with all of the activities, so smart and curious and creative, and yeah, and the fact that she got to skip school for the day because her dad took her out of school and they came to Guelph and they did a bunch of different activities and then they came to our activity for the evening. And yeah, she left a mark on me because she was so enamored with all of the activities we were doing and so appreciative. And so was her father of the fact that these activities were being put on. They were so hands-on. We had a fantastic group of, scientists who were there as volunteers from different departments at the university, grad students and faculty and staff. And the fact that they could get to do it for free was just incredible. So yeah, I definitely remember her very much.
I can imagine that, like, obviously you get reactions sometimes from people that are like, the big like wow excited reactions, but just seeing the quiet sort of spark of inspiration behind
Hmm.
someone's eyes, we were like, okay, this is planting like a seed of just excitement and a lifelong love of science and exploration that
Hmm.
is gonna reward them for the rest of their life. So congrats to you and the Royal City Science team for being able to create that sort of inspirational moments.
Yeah, I mean it's what every teacher educator does their job for, right? It's that light bulb moment
Hmm.
where you see, and it doesn't have to be that dramatic light bulb moment. It's just something in the eyes that you can see that this is connecting on a really deep level, and you know that it's going to have an effect. And that's honestly what that's every teacher's dream.
Hmm. Well, Joanne, I can't think of a better way to end the conversation than that. that spark and that inspiration. So thanks so much for joining me today. And it was really great to hear about everything that you and the Royal City Science team are doing. And I encourage everyone to seek you out because it's a great and important and necessary work that you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you. It was great joining you today.
Thanks for listening to Growing Guelph. I've been your host, Jordan Sloggett. Be sure to subscribe to us on social media, on your favorite podcast app, and if you have a recommendation for a future guest you'd like me to speak to, you can reach out to me at growingguelph@gmail.com.